And now I would like to invite here, I'm very pleased to invite here the conductor of the survey, Dr. Raimo Vuorinen from the University of Jyväskylä. And Raimo Vuorinen also works as project manager at the Finnish Institute of Educational Research. His research interest is on evidence-based lifelong guidance policy development, as well as on the use of ICT in guidance. He was, for many years, the coordinator of the European Lifelong Guidance Policy Network, which assisted the European Union member states and the Commission in moving European cooperation on lifelong guidance toward in both the education and the employment sectors. And hopefully his presentation stimulates reflections for both days of the conference. Please.
Good morning. Thank you. First, I would like to thank the Estonian presidency of hosting this conference because since 2006, the countries agreed to have biennial policy conferences to discuss about guidance policies and practices, and now this is the 7th time, so it's sort of an indicator of the strong commitment of the countries and also an indicator that we are keeping this dialogue on policy agenda during these years. And also your country responses to the questionnaire, they also, it's a strong signal of the interest to continue this dialogue between across the sectors, but also between the countries. So the theme today, I was asked to reflect the country responses in the light of technology and the change of guidance. And the previous speakers highlighted the changes. Oh, does it work? Yes. I'm just briefly highlighting some of the issues which are taking place within the labour market. And we are not the only conference who have been discussing these themes during this year. Before midsummer in June, we had a symposium in Korea. About over 20 countries were discussing is guidance up to date in the changes, these global changes. And also at the end of June, the European Network of Public Employment Services were discussing whether the guidance services within the PES sector are up to date to meet the challenges. So I'm referring to some of those findings and discussions as well. But just to highlight what is striking is the speed that is taking place. And the issue that relate or have impact is guidance up to date is the new forms of employment. And I could highlight that instead of paid job, which we used to have previously, we have now outsourcing or independent contractors or gig work, or also we have potentially also lower employment standards. And this means more insecurity among the individuals. And then we can ask whether guidance is up to date. Mr. Kalleha, he was referring that we need to be we have to be employable or be faster. So this means that there is a stronger interest in guidance both from individuals but also from the policymakers. And we heard from the Commission that its guidance is highlighted or included in the key policy document across the sectors. So that is an outcome of the recent development. But there's one let's say, invitation which was presented by you in your responses, that how to have a coherence of the references across the sectors. So are we talking about it with the same language within different policy fields? So that's an issue that needs further attention. If I think of the individual and the in order to be employable, we need a new skill. And we have been highlighting the importance of career management skills as an explicit competence which can be learned. So within these times of insecurity, we need more information about the labour market trends. Sometimes we need support in transitions, but in order to navigate in this system, we need the skill for our career management skills, how to identify the drivers of change which are taking place, how we learn to read the signals that might have impact in our future or our options in the labour market. And if we are able to read the signals, we might be able to find or identify learning goals for ourselves, how we can improve our employability. And then when we are looking or upskilling ourselves, we can do it in workplace settings, formal learning, informal learning, and then we need the validation. But when we are going to the labor market, then we have to also indicate what are our skills. So this is a skill which can be learned, and we can use it either as employed or self-employed. So it's more than just entrepreneurial skills which have a similar elements in them. So one of the message or the options for the future policy document is also to include the career management skills, perhaps more explicitly in the revision of the lifelong key competencies for lifelong learning in the future. But today's conference, we have 6 themes. They relate to practices, evidence, competence, cooperation, access, and better mobility. And during the next slides, I will highlight some of the issues which emerged in your responses, but also some references to previous conferences and to the research. But first, how could we transform the guidance, or how guidance could go to a next chapter, as Mr. Grab you mentioned? So we need to take into account the language what we are using. Previously, when we have been talking about ICT in guidance in these conferences, or when we have been reading research, we have been talking about guidance as such, and then ICT in guidance like a separate theme. But being aware of the recent technological development and changes, and also the recent research, we are in a situation we have to reposition guidance, or reposition the ICT and its links with guidance. So instead of just talking separately about them, I would go to the guidance functions and the, let's say, the processes which are included within guidance or within career development from individual perspective. And we have to take the language into account, the language what we are using as we are providing the services, like we are providing education and training. And then our students, they are learning, and that's their language. Now when we are using the ICT, we have different ways of working. We have one-to-one communication, and this can take place in a physical room like this, or through distance. And this means the one-to-one communication, then ICT can be a sort of channel of communication, or we can channel for, let's say, asynchronous or multisynchronous way, but it's a channel. Then we have group activities. So the group activities can take place in a room like this, or on online platforms or virtual spaces. So, and then we come to the face-to-face or distant resources for assessment and using the labor market information. So that is the self-help mode. I can go to a career center or one-stop center and read the materials, do some assessment or exercises. I can talk to a professional. But this can take also an online working space. So in a way, we are having the same guidance functions either on physical space or online. But these 3 elements, the practitioners, they are in a way representing the supplier on this process. So they are providing the goals and directions how this process is managed. But if we take into account the technology, and especially the social media, it means that we are not only anymore providing the services, and we are not the only ones who have access to the resources. So the citizens and individuals, they have the same access, but also they can generate and sort of create the knowledge which are used in career development. And this takes place with or without the help of practitioner. And then in order to have that language that we could use and position the technology, we could use the word co-careering. We are in a way responsible, and like Mr. Leitmetz said, that the principles of the education to promote the learning and the responsibility of the process, and then we could say that we are co-constructing the knowledge around career-related issues. So this means that the technology is a new way to modeling the elements of guidance in the next chapter, and how these were included within your responses. If I go to the innovative practices and peer learning, we were asking that how could cooperation improve policy and practice? So what you referred was that we could or we should build on previous mechanisms of cooperations which have been taking place during the last decades, and use the learning outcomes. For example, the Center for Presence study on ICT and LMI, and also the jointly developed online courses in different projects, and also through cooperation, for example, in the Nordic countries. We should have online structured databases of guidance systems integrated with working spaces or workspaces for mutual learning, but also involve the stakeholders and users in the design of the services. Then if I go to the evidence, ICT provides opportunity to, let's say, collect or make the process transparent. When we are integrating ICT or technology in the guidance processes, we can check that we are covering the information need or the assessment, self-exercises, plans, and also the follow-up tracking. So we get a lot of information, and through ICT we can connect this to the guidance process. And this has been the biggest challenge, that we have not been able to link the interventions with the potential outcomes. So we could use ICT to link the needs of users with the existing resources and the services. And then we can also check to what extent we are meeting the needs of the individuals and having this type of balance and maintain stable services through these mechanisms. And we can also have a common language, common definitions, so making the marketing the services in such manner that the users are understanding what we mean by different services. And as I mentioned, we can now have this integrative role of ICT, not only develop specific tools for one specific guidance purposes. Then we come to the competencies of practitioners. In a number of countries, this element has not been included within the training and initial and continuing training of guidance professionals. So we do have a variety of different programs, and when we tried to collect information about guidance professionals and competencies throughout Europe, we didn't find, let's say, one format that would cover all the different countries or the member states. So there's a lot of variety and different competence frameworks within existing within the countries, and different ways of how professionalism is guaranteed, either through legislation or accreditation or national standards, or register with professionals, registers of professional practitioners. But however, there's a need to strengthen the use of technology in the profession, and providing opportunities to link this with initial and continuing training. But also taking into account that when we are developing the training, we should guarantee that practitioners have opportunities to work across the sectors. So we should involve the different stakeholders, HRD, or the different community providers in designing and delivering the training in order to get this, let's say, common framework and common language among the service providers. And also using the ICT to support the mutual learning among providers. Then the next one is the integrated support. This is quite important, that we have evidence that on the policy level we have statements that more cooperation is needed. Countries have like lifelong guidance forums or other representative mechanisms to promote the dialogue between the sectors, and we work with in multi-professional teams with our clients or with the individuals who are using the service. But then it's on organizational level we could have more cooperation. So ICT provides an opportunity to model what are the elements of the services when individuals are using different sectors. But if we have a coherence across the sectors, and we know what are the services, and we agree on the expected outcomes jointly, then we can, let's say, provide common services, not only thinking what are we as suppliers, but what we should achieve together and how each of us will contribute to this common goal. So the one-stop concept might be one solution to have it in a physical center, but also using the ICT, bringing together the different tools and services from the different sectors. And this implies that we should not develop the guidance tools on their own, like for guidance purposes, if we are providing e-services to citizens, like here in Estonia, the e-Estonia. So it would make sense to include career services as part of the other e-services, so link guidance to e-governance of the country. And we have examples of this type of developed. And this means that if we are then increasing the online services, but it means that the self-help becomes important, or there's more volume on the self-help, and this implies that we have to help this individuals develop these skills, how to link this within their career design or career management, and how they are planning their future. So the ICT literature is linked with career management skills. The next one is the access. When we have been asking countries the rationale why ICT is used or technology is used in guidance, one form is to widen access. So we can widen access if we think that we can think technology as a convenience issue or necessity. Sometimes it's a necessity when we want to widen access in rural areas for individuals who have difficulties in getting physical access to centers. So that's one rationale. But on the other hand, if we think guidance, I have been highlighting the importance of individual career management skills, but guidance is also a social contract. So we have to pay attention that we are providing publicly funded tools and information for the individuals and also the service providers to guarantee the minimum level of the services. So in a way, I'm emphasizing the role of guidance as a social contract. And ICT provides opportunity to develop outreach and also community-based services. So not only, it's a one way to reach out and widen the scope of the services. And then in terms of the mobility, ICT provides opportunities to have access to the tools and information which supports the mobility. We can also have use the technology to jointly design and collect the information that we are using. So in a way, it's again this two-way communication what is important. And we can also use the big data if we think there are other data sources, not only guidance, but try to link the guidance intervention with the big data. And the last one is the enhancement of portfolio strategies and pedagogical approaches in this process. So matching is not enough. It's very appealing that many countries inform that we like to decrease the skills mismatch by taking matching tools which are based on artificial intelligence as such. But if it's only matching, it's enough. We have to link it with the individual process and portfolios and link this big data with the national data sources. To conclude, if we look at the guidelines that were developed 2 years ago, the Chapter 9 is a guideline on the use of technology, ICT in the guidance systems and policy development. This definition of guidance is still up to date. When writing these guidelines, the member states take into account that ICT relates to products and infrastructure and also the electronic content. So this is, well, here we go. So it relates to products, infrastructure and electronic content that we are using when we are designing career services, resources and tools. But it's also a process when we are using these tools, and then we are providing the tools, but we are collecting the data, how they are used. We can use this data in reshaping the design of the services. But then we are also, if we use ICT in this integrative role, we model the entity, but we have also the tools to collect feedback, how we design and further enhance the services. So I'm highlighting that we have to have a new language for guidance and then use ICT in different processes, but the most important is that modeling the services. And this implies that if we are now discussing this within a policy level, tomorrow we will talk in more details about the country responses in this respect. But we found out that we need like a conceptual framework among different sectors if we want to take full potential of ICT. We have examples of these fragmented tools which are designed for one guidance purpose. Then we need to have efforts to bring them together again. So in a way, it doesn't help to get the integrated services or multi-channel services. So to conclude, some invitations for you during the workshop is think of these key messages which came out in your responses. You emphasize the importance to enhancement of the previous cooperation and coordination which has been developed through different measures, different networks, different projects, and both on European and national level. So we have to look what is the jointly agreed outcome of our activities. But we need to also provide information for policymakers to widen their understanding also on guidance, how to update the current new transforming role of guidance and how is it integrated within the e-governance strategies on a national level. And there's a need for structured data and also need for consistent cooperation when we are collecting and disseminating the information. And finally, the country responses signal very strong the need for coherence of lifelong guidance across policy sectors, but also a new mandate to continue the work that has been developed during the last 15 years. So I thank for this opportunity, and we have time for some questions and dialogue during the next 2 days.
Yes, so we have actually got some questions from the workshop. So there was one question that was there, do career guidance professionals in Estonia enjoy the same kind of professional autonomy as your teachers? Are they given a broad target and deadline, but trusted to achieve that by using their professional judgment? Mr. Leidmets, would you care to answer? Or would you like to take it later? Yes, yes, okay. And we have some more questions. We have one question. How to guide people outside of educational system? Any examples?
In a number of countries, we have outreach services. So often we have also evidence that people who know what to look for, they know where the services are, they come to the guidance centers or they approach the practitioners. So this is often the case, and one of the challenges is those who are outside of the system. So one way of doing this is the outreach services, but also using the technology. And the number of countries are developing these low threshold one-stop centers. So that seems an option where different sectors join their expertise and join their resources and try to, let's say, provide and, let's say, identify the needs, but also the latent needs of the services. So in a way, it's a marketing issue and the language we are using when we are trying to emphasize the individual needs. So I think when I was using the supplier language and then the user language, I think we need to have these both available. Often we talk what are our services, how do we serve the individuals, but when taking the needs, I think that's one way forward.
There is one more question. Are there practices how different country cooperation has expanded guidance delivery?
When we did the impact analysis of the European Lifelong Guidance Policy networks, the countries informed that this increased cooperation has had impact on widening the services. And it's due to that this is a task that none of the sectors can do alone. So the widening access has been through joining forces and joining the resources, and as I mentioned, having the common language how they are marketing the services. So this, I strongly emphasize the need both on policy level, but also looking at the provision level, how we can make agreements with different sectors to join forces and resources and expertise.